Chapter 24, Letters 1884 to Howells and Others, Cable's Great April Fool, Huck Finn in Press, Mark Twain for Cleveland, Clemens and Cable, by Mark Twain. Mark Twain had a lingering attack of the dramatic fever that winter. He made a play of The Prince and Pauper, which Howells pronounced too thin and slight and not half long enough. He made another of Tom Sawyer, and probably destroyed it, for no trace of the Miz exists today. Howells could not join in these ventures, for he was otherwise occupied and had sickness in his household. To W. D. Howells in Boston. Jan 784. My dear Howells, oh my goodens, as Jean says, you have now encountered at last the heaviest calamity that can befall an author. The scarlet fever, once domesticated, is a permanent member of the family. Money may desert you, friends forsake you, enemies grow indifferent to you, but the scarlet fever will be true to you, through thick and thin, till you be all saved or damned down to the last one. I say these things to cheer you. The bare suggestion of scarlet fever in the family makes me shudder. I believe I would almost rather have Osgood publish a book for me. You folks have our most sincere sympathy. Oh, the intrusion of this hideous disease is an unspeakable disaster. My billiard table is stacked up with books relating to the Sandwich Islands. The walls axe upholstered with scraps of paper, penciled with notes drawn from them. I have saturated myself with knowledge of that unimaginably beautiful land and that most strange and fascinating people. And I have begun a story. Its hidden motive will illustrate a but little considered fact in human nature, that the religious folly you are born in you will die in, no matter what apparently reasonabler religious folly may seem to have taken its place meanwhile, and abolished and obliterated it. I start Bill Ragsdale at 12 years of age, and the heroine at 4, in the midst of the ancient idolatrous system, with its picturesque and amazing customs and superstitions, 3 months before the arrival of the missionaries and the erection of a shallow Christianity upon the ruins of the old paganism. Then these two will become educated Christians and highly civilized. And then I will jump 15 years and do Ragsdale's leper business. When we came to dramatize, we can draw a deal of matter from the story, all ready to our hand. Ers ever Mark. He never finished the Sandwich Islands story, which he and Howells were to dramatize later. His head filled up with other projects, such as publishing plans, reading tour, and the like. The typesetting machine does not appear in the letters of this period, but it was an important factor, nevertheless. It was costing several $1,000s a month for construction and becoming a heavy drain on Mark Twain's finances. It was necessary to recuperate, and the anxiety for a profitable play or some other adventure that would bring a quick and generous return grew out of this need. Clemens had established Charles L. Webster, his nephew by marriage, in a New York office as selling agent for the Mississippi book and for his plays. He was also planning to let Webster publish the new book, Huck Finn. George W. Cable had proven his ability as a reader, and Clemens saw possibilities in a reading combination, which was first planned to include Aldrich and Howells and a private car. But Aldrich and Howells did not warm to the idea, and the car was eliminated from the plan. Cable came to visit Clemens in Hartford and was taken with the mumps, so that the reading trip was postponed. The fortunes of the Sellers play were most uncertain and becoming daily more doubtful. In February, Howells wrote, "If you have got any comfort in regard to our play, I wish you would heave it into my bosom." Cable recovered in time, and out of gratitude planned a great April Fool surprise for his host. He was a systematic man, and did it in his usual thorough way. He sent a private and confidential suggestion to 150 of Mark Twain's friends and admirers, nearly all distinguished literary men. The suggestion was that each one of them should send a request for Mark Twain's autograph, timing it so that it would arrive on the 1st of April. All seemed to have responded. Mark Twain's writing table on April Fool morning was heaped with letters, asking in every ridiculous fashion for his valuable autograph. The one from Aldrich was a fair sample. He wrote, "I am making a collection of autographs of our distinguished writers, and having read one of your works, Gabriel Convoy, I would like to add your name to the list." Of course, the joke in this was that Gabriel Convoy was by Bret Harte, who by this time was thoroughly detested by Mark Twain. The first one or two of the letters puzzled the victim, then he comprehended the size and character of the joke and entered into it thoroughly. One of the letters was from Bloodgood H. Cutter, the poet laureate of Innocents Abroad. Cutter, of course, wrote in poetry, that is to say, doggerel. Mark Twain's April Fool was a most pleasant one. Rhymed letter by Bloodgood H. Cutter to Mark Twain. Chapter 51, TTLE Neck, Long Island. Long Island farmer, to his friend and pilgrim brother. Samuel L. Clemens-esque. Friends suggest in each one's behalf to write and ask your autograph. To refuse that I will not do, after the long voyage had with you. That was a memorable time, you wrote in prose. I wrote in rhyme to describe the wonders of each place and the queer customs of each race. That is in my memory, yet for while I live I'll not forget. I often think of that affair, and the many that were with us there. As your friends think it for the best, I ask your autograph with the rest, hoping you will it to me send. 'Twill please and cheer your dear old friend. Yours truly, Bloodgood H. Cutter. To W. D. Howells in Boston. Hartford, App 84. My dear Howells, it took my breath away, and I haven't recovered it yet entirely. I mean the generosity of your proposal to read the proofs of Huck Finn. Now if you mean it, old man, if you are in earnest, proceed, in God's name, and be by me forever blessed. I cannot conceive of a rational man deliberately piling such an atrocious job upon himself, but if there is such a man and you be that man, why then pile it on. It will cost me a pang every time I think of it, but this anguish will be eingebus to me in the joy and comfort I shall get out of the not having to read the Verpflichkeit proofs myself. But if you have repented of your Augenblicklicher Tobsucht, and got back to calm, cold reason again, I won't hold you to it unless I find I have got you down in writing somewhere. Herr, I would not read the proof of one of my books for any fair and reasonable sum whatever, if I could get out of it. The proofreading on the P and P cost me the last rags of my religion. 1,000. Howells had written that he would be glad to help out in the reading of the proofs of Huck Finn, which book Webster by this time had in hand. Replying to Clemens's eager and grateful acceptance now, he wrote, "It is all perfectly true about the generosity, unless I am going to read your proofs from one of the shabby motives which I always find at the bottom of my soul if I examine it. A characteristic utterance, though we may be permitted to believe that his shabby motives were fewer and less shabby than those of mankind in general." The proofs which Howells was reading pleased him mightily. Once, during the summer, he wrote, "If I had written half as good a book as Huck Finn, I shouldn't ask anything better than to read the proofs. Even as it is, I don't, so send them on. They will always find me somewhere." This was the summer of the Blaine Cleveland campaign. Mark Twain, in company with many other leading men, had mugwumped and was supporting Cleveland. From the next letter we gather something of the aspects of that memorable campaign, which was one of scandal and vituperation. We learn, too, that the young sculptor, Karl Gerhardt, having completed a 3-year study in Paris, had returned to America a qualified artist. To W. D. Howells in Boston. Elmira Ogg, 2184. My dear Howells, this presidential campaign is too delicious for anything. Isn't human nature the most consummate sham and lie that was ever invented? Isn't man a creature to be ashamed of in pretty much all his aspects? Man, know thyself, and then thou wilt despise thyself, to a dead moral certainty. Take 3 quite good specimens, Hawley, Warner, and Charlie Clark. Even I do not loathe Blaine more than they do, yet Hawley is howling for Blaine, Warner and Clark are eating their daily crow in the paper for him, and all 3 will vote for him. O stultification, where is thy sting? O slave, where is thy hickory? I suppose you heard how a marble monument, for which St. Gaudens was pecuniarily responsible, burned down in Hartford the other day, uninsured. For who in the world would ever think of insuring a marble shaft in a cemetery against a fire? And left St. Gaudens out of pocket $15,000. It was a bad day for artists. Gerhardt finished my bust that day, and the work was pronounced admirable by all the kin and friends, but in putting it in plaster, or rather taking it out, next day it got ruined. It was 4 or 5 weeks' hard work gone to the dogs. The news flew, and everybody on the farm flocked to the arbor and grouped themselves about the wreck in a profound and moving silence. The farm help, the colored servants, the German nurse, the children, everybody. A silence interrupted at wide intervals by absent-minded ejaculations, rising from unconscious breasts, as the whole size of the disaster gradually worked its way home to the realization of one spirit after another. Some burst out with one thing, some another. The German nurse put up her hands and said, "Oh, shade, oh, Schrecklich." But Gerhardt said nothing, or almost that. He couldn't word it, I suppose. But he went to work and by dark had everything thoroughly well underway for a fresh start in the morning, and in 3 days' time had built a new bust which was a trifle better than the old one. And tomorrow we shall put the finishing touches on it, and it will be about as good a one as nearly anybody can make. Yours ever, Mark. If you run across anybody who wants a bust, be sure and recommend Gerhardt on my say-so. But Howells was determinedly for Blaine. I shall vote for Blaine, he replied. I do not believe he is guilty of the things they accuse him of, and I know they are not proved against him. As for Cleveland, his private life may be no worse than that of most men, but as an enemy of that contemptible, hypocritical, lopsided morality which says a woman shall suffer all the shame of unchastity and man none, I want to see him destroyed politically by his past. The men who defend him would take their wives to the White House if he were president, but if he married his concubine, made her an honest woman, they would not go near him. I can't stand that. Certainly this was sound logic in that day at least, but it left Clemens far from satisfied. To W. D. Howells in Boston. Elmira, Sept. 1784. My dear Howells, somehow I can't seem to rest quiet under the idea of your voting for Blaine. I believe you said something about the country and the party. Certainly allegiance to these is well, but as certainly a man's first duty is to his own conscience and honor, the party or the country comes second to that, and never first. I don't ask you to vote at all. I only urge you to not soil yourself by voting for Blaine. When you wrote before, you were able to say the charges against him were not proven. But you know now that they are proven, and it seems to me that that bars you and all other honest and honorable men, who are independently situated, from voting for him. It is not necessary to vote for Cleveland. The only necessary thing to do, as I understand it, is that a man shall keep himself clean, by withholding his vote for an improper man, even though the party and the country go to destruction in consequence. It is not parties that make or save countries or that build them to greatness. It is clean men, clean ordinary citizens, rank and file, the masses. Clean masses are not made by individuals standing back till the rest become clean. As I said before, I think a man's first duty is to his own honor, not to his country and not to his party. Don't be offended, I mean no offense. I am not so concerned about the rest of the nation, but, well, goodbye. Wise ever, Mark. There does not appear to be any further discussion of the matter between Howells and Clemens. Their letters, for a time, contained no suggestion of politics. Perhaps Mark Twain's own political conscience was not entirely clear in his repudiation of his party. At least, we may believe from his next letter that his Cleveland enthusiasm was qualified by a willingness to support a Republican who would command his admiration and honor. The idea of an 11th-hour nomination was rather startling, whatever its motive. To Mr. Pierce in Boston. Hartford, Oct. 2284. My dear Mr. Pierce, you know as well as I do that the reason the majority of Republicans are going to vote for Blaine is because they feel that they cannot help themselves. Do not you believe that if Mr. Edmunds would consent to run for president on the independent ticket, even at this late day, he might be elected? Well, if he wouldn't consent, but should even strenuously protest, and say he wouldn't serve if elected, isn't it still wise and fair to nominate him and vote for him? Since his protest would relieve him from all responsibility, and he couldn't surely find fault with people for forcing a compliment upon him. And do not you believe that his name, thus compulsorily placed at the head of the independent column, would work absolutely certain defeat to Blaine and save the country's honor? Politicians often carry a victory by springing some disgraceful and rascally mine under the feet of the adversary at the 11th hour. Would it not be wholesome to vary this thing for once and spring as formidable a mine of a better sort under the enemy's works? If Edmund's name were put up, I would vote for him in the teeth of all the protesting and blaspheming he could do in a month, and there are lots of others who would do likewise. If this notion is not a foolish and wicked one, won't you just consult with some chief independents and see if they won't call a sudden convention and whoop the thing through? To nominate Edmunds the 1st of November would be soon enough, wouldn't it? With kindest regards to you and the Aldriches. Or truly S. L. Clemens. Clemens and Cable set out on their reading tour in November. They were a curiously assorted pair. Cable was of orthodox religion, exact as to habits, neat, prim, all that Clemens was not. In the beginning, Cable undertook to read the Bible aloud to Clemens each evening, but this part of the day's program was presently omitted by request. If they spent Sunday in a town, Cable was up bright and early visiting the various churches and Sunday schools, while Mark Twain remained at the hotel, in bed, reading, or asleep.